Hello everybody, and welcome to our third and final video for week 3 of Social Psych. And we are finally at the point where we are talking about self-presentation. In other words, how we strategically craft our image, how we try to come off in certain ways to other people. And to get us thinking about these issues, I first want to introduce you to the dramaturgical perspective. This was developed by a sociologist named Erving Goffman in 1959. And Goffman's central claim is that a very useful model for thinking about how we present ourselves in public is thinking of us as akin to actors, playing various roles throughout their careers. So, obviously, we are not actually faking our lives. Unless you are a scam artist, unless you are a pathological liar, right? You're not literally play acting through your life. But this metaphor has a lot of very useful layers to it. So one of the layers is this idea that we often are presenting ourselves for multiple kinds of audiences across time. Let's say I inhabit the roles of wife, mother, and businesswoman, right? The way that I seek to present myself to my colleagues or a potential client is likely extremely different than the way I craft my appearance for my romantic partner, my family, my children, right? There's also this analogy of the idea of putting on a convincing performance. So we want to inhabit our role fully, right? If I think being a businesswoman means coming off as very professional, extremely competent, extremely strong, I want to embody professionalism and strength. But I also don't want to look like I'm faking it. I don't want to look like I'm just trying to appear strong. I want to come off like I am strong, right? So there's this idea of some performances being more convincing, others may be ringing a little bit inauthentic, and we generally prefer to come off as sincere and genuine, right? So, along with this, let's start to consider the idea that some roles are better than others. In the same way that if you're an aspiring actor in Hollywood, you'd probably prefer to be the, leading woman or leading man rather than the sassy sidekick. We generally want to self-present in certain ways and not others. And conveniently, these align very closely with what we were just talking about in terms of person perception. So if you think about person perception, that we often very quickly detect whether or not we think other people are warm. There's an analog to that in terms of how we try to present to other people. And that analog is likability. We try to come off as friendly, trustworthy, and pleasant, rather than as being jerks, as being abrasive, as being unpleasant. In terms of person perception, I just told you that we pay a lot of attention to whether or not somebody else seems to be competent. Well, we self-present for that too. Almost always, right, given the choice, we would rather come off as intelligent and capable, meaning competent, and as powerful and high status, right? So competence, when we're talking about person perception, kind of splits into two different facets with self-presentation. Your textbook is going to talk about competence as well as status. So I'm going to do a deep dive into talking specifically about that first attribute. We just learned that warmth is actually the main thing we pay attention to even before we start to pay attention to competence. Likability is also similarly one of the most important things we try to convey to other people. And there are lots of ways that we can amp up how likable we seem to be. So these strategies, your textbook calls them ingratiation strategies, ways of getting people to find you likable, include things like making yourself seem really relatable to someone else, drawing attention to points of connection and points of similarity, because we actually find similarity to be really rewarding. It also helps to be physically attractive. Sorry, unfortunately, one of those things we can't necessarily control. And it helps, of course, to have other appealing personal qualities. A good sense of humor, right? A sharp wit, a lot of interesting things to say at cocktail parties. We can also try to demonstrate modesty and humility, and this is a really important one to pay attention to, because this is where we start to see some friction with other ways you might try to self-present. But we tend to find people to be more warm and more likable when instead of being show-offs or instead of being competitive, they seem to be modest and humble. And finally, and in some ways one of the easiest ones to achieve, you can seem more likable simply by really authentically conveying your liking for other people. And this is because we all want to be liked, right? It's this weird sort of, um, bi-directional relationship. We like being liked, and so when someone seems to appreciate you, respect you, admire you, it feels amazing, and it tends to rub off on how we feel about that other person, right? This is called the principle of reciprocity. We tend to like people who like us. So in some ways, it might seem like this strategy is the absolute easiest way to get other people to feel positively towards us. It should be very easy to convey liking for others. There's just one problem. We are also very attuned to times where it seems like this isn't authentic. And when it seems like someone is trying to suck up to us and it doesn't seem authentic, it can very easily backfire. I'm going to lead you through a couple specific examples of how this can happen. So one time when ingratiation strategies are likely to backfire is when we feel like somebody might have an ulterior motive. There was a study conducted by Brownstein and Siegel in 1977. I'm going to be calling it the vending machine study. And basically what these researchers did is they set up a situation where you might feel like somebody else had a reason to suck up to you, or you're really given no reason to think that they might want to suck up to you. Now, in the condition where you're led to think that the person might have an ulterior motive, you are told that you are about to evaluate their performance on a task where you're going to cooperate together. And if you give them a good rating, they'll be given a bonus in terms of their compensation for the study, an extra $5. If you say they did a bad job, they'll get an especially low payment, let's say 50 cents. You know this, they know this, right? So they are now sort of indebted to you or dependent on you. There's another cross-cutting condition. So either you think you control their compensation or you don't. And secondarily, this person either offers you a favor or they don't. Now, this other research participant is, of course, actually an actor, a confederate, who's working with the research team. So, in one condition, you both learn that you're controlling how much money they make. And then they go out into the hallway, they come back with 2 sodas, and they say, hey, I just needed to go get a beverage, I bought you one too. In another version of this, they offer you that favor, they offer you that gift, but they do it before you learn the instructions for the study. So they've done this really nice thing before they even knew that you had some kind of power over them. And then in a final condition, the person never offers you a soda, right? So they don't go out of their way to offer you a soda, they're also not sucking up to you. So it turns out we really like people when they go out of their way to be nice to us, but we really don't like it if they do that and they might have an ulterior motive. Your liking for this other person, if they never buy you a soda, is medium. It's about 5.5. If they buy you a soda before the study instructions have been given, before they have any reason to think you have power over them, you like them substantially more. It's closer to like a 6. If you're in that condition, this highly dependent condition, where you think that you have power over their study payment, and you both learn this information, and then they go buy you a soda, you like them substantially less, because you perceive it as inauthentic, and you perceive it as potentially tainted by this ulterior motive. So similarly, we also might see ingratiation as insincere if it just doesn't come off quite right. And this is something you might more likely encounter in just your everyday interactions. Let's take one step back. One of the most powerful signals of liking that we have for another person is the smile. And we often smile a lot throughout the day, right? If you were, in non-COVID times and in crowded buildings, walking down crowded pathways, you'd probably smile at dozens, if not hundreds of people a day. Here's the thing. While smiles can powerfully convey liking, they do it much better if they seem really genuine and really real. And this would be what we would call a Duchenne smile. This is the smile that this woman is giving that is most to the right. And this is a smile that doesn't just involve raising the cheeks and baring the teeth. It also involves a lot of activity around the eyes. And specifically, you start to see those crow's feet, right? And we're actually pretty good at detecting when someone is giving off what's unauthentic, called a Duchenne smile, versus when they're giving off what's called a social smile, where you don't have the eye activity. And this actually has really powerful consequences for how we perceive other people. So there was a study that looked at Duchenne smiles, non-Duchenne smiles, and how they affected just simple split-second perceptions of another person's face on attractiveness and ratings of things related to warmth, like their agreeableness, their generosity, and their sociability. So for attractiveness, we see that Duchenne smiles are seen as a little bit more attractive than non-Duchenne smiles. But you start to really see the difference when we're rating someone in terms of how generous they seem. The purple bar here, the Duchenne smile, has a huge advantage. How agreeable they seem, again, pretty big advantage for that Duchenne smile, and a huge advantage in terms of sociability or extroversion, right? So you can't just fake smile your way into other people perceiving you positively. It has to come from a genuine place. What's interesting is this seems to be pretty basic and pretty hardwired, because it doesn't take long in childhood development before kids are savvy enough to be able to tell the difference between Duchenne and fake or just social performative smiling. It happens around 3 to 4 years old. So, appearing likability can get you a long ways. It's one of the first things we judge about other people. It's one of the things we most consistently strive for when we're interacting with other folks. But that also means we can often be motivated to fake it, right? And so it's kind of like an arms race. All the strategies that people have for insincerely trying to ingratiate themselves often have a flip side, where people are ready to sniff out signs of inauthenticity, and then it really backfires, right? So if you have to fake it, right, try to be very subtle. That's my advice to you. So now I want us to quickly think about these other dimensions of self-presentation. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail because I think your textbook does an excellent job talking about strategies for portraying status and competence. When you're trying to appear competent, you can do things like stage performances, which is basically finding ways to show off your skills and talents. You can make verbal claims as to how good you are at things, right? Talk about how you won your high school debate championship. You can try to surround yourself by markers that make you look competent, right? You could buy a really nice suit. You can have a really professional planner. And when you fail, you might do things like make excuses and blame your lack of success on outside obstacles. We also often try to self-present as being powerful, influential, or high status. And to do things like this, we might engage in conspicuous consumption, having these kind of luxury status symbols. We might try to closely associate with people who already have status and power. Just think about this phenomenon of people liking to post, Facebook pictures of themselves having met celebrities, or post, an Instagram photo of them at a fundraiser with a politician. We can try to physically or non-verbally communicate dominance by taking up more space, speaking with a deeper tone of voice. So there's a lot of different strategies we can do to appear warm, likable, capable and competent, and high status and influential. But I just want you to take a moment to think. I'm not going to get too deep into this in this lecture, but just take a moment to think. What are ways that might prevent you from always coming off as highly warm, highly competent, and highly powerful? Why might it not always be possible to have our cake and eat it too? To be seen as friendly at the same time that we're dominant, to be seen as incredibly intelligent at the same time that we seem laid back and relatable, right? I'm sure you can start thinking of examples. And in general, not only can these strategies individually backfire, right? Trying to suck up to someone could actually make you less likable. But also, there are ways where by trying to appear warm, we come off as less powerful and commanding. By trying to appear really smart, we come off as less humble and modest, right? So this is the tension of self-presentation. I'll leave you with that, and I look forward to seeing you in class.